Humans were not only interested in just the diversity or the difference between the organisms, we were also interested in the relationships between these organisms. And now this branch is called as systematics, something that we mentioned in the beginning, right? Taxonomy and systematics. Now this systematics, the word that systema, it is a word from Latin. Okay, it's derived from Latin, and this branch of study is systematics. Now one more thing is Carolus Linnaeus, he titled his publication as Systema Naturae. This systematics has a lot to do with identification, classification, and nomenclature. Please remember these points, and you might feel like then what's the difference between this and taxonomy? Firstly, it doesn't involve characterization, and also taxonomy is a broader context and has a lot more specificity to it, and it also involves diversity. This talks about the relationship. Okay. Next point is eventually systematics has grown to a point where we even study evolutionary relationship between organisms, and by evolutionary I mean from the origin. Like we have, they say monkey to man, right? So that monkey to man thing is an evolutionary pyramid. It's an evolutionary process, evolutionary ladder that we have come across. So it also deals with such relationships. Say evolutionarily we are related to somebody, like a species or something. So we even understand topics like that. So now that we have discussed relationships, diversity, taxonomy, and even on systematics, let us talk about one important term, classification. Now classification has to do with the hierarchy of steps, and these hierarchy of steps has to do with different terms, right? Now these are different categories. They are called as taxonomic categories. Okay, taxonomic categories. Now, as I mentioned before, categories can also be called as a taxon, and now they have introduced a new phrase here, a new term here, that is rank. Rank is the same as taxon. Say rank, we have known it as something that has to do with grades, right? We are ranked, say out of 2 students, one student is rank 1 and the other student is rank 2, then that rank, he is at a certain level. This one is also at a certain level, right? So it represents a level or a rank. And what all of these terms basically mean is unit, right? So this much is clear to us. Now, please remember, I'll just summarize it just one last time. The taxonomic hierarchy has to do with taxonomic categories, which is the taxon, which is also referred to as the rank, which is the unit of taxonomical classification. Okay, very simple, but please remember what I mentioned, that taxon is based on how you characterize it. If you are talking about a certain level, then that level is also called as a taxon. Next level, may it be bigger, may it be smaller, may it be different from the other level, it too is a taxon. It has nothing to, there is no particular relationship. Okay, the bigger it is, then that is called as a taxon. Or when we think about unit, it's like we think about something so small, right? So that doesn't mean that the smallest individual, the smallest part of this whole hierarchy is a taxon. No, even the biggest one, that is the kingdom, Animalia, animals. Animals are also a taxon. Okay, please remember this. Do not get confused with this point. And now let's go to the next point. That is, let us talk on how how we can connect it to an example to understand. Now we have insects, right? I didn't mention much about insects, but now good thing we have a good example mentioned about this. Now when we talk about this insects, there's something that makes them common, something that helps us to identify them. What is that? They have 3 pairs of jointed legs. 3 pairs of jointed legs. Now that is something concrete, something that is visible, something that we can understand very easily. So that gives it a term. And now we can use this as a category of creatures that has this sort of legs. Now that is an insect. So what is it? It is also a taxon, right? in its at its own level. Now insects is also a taxon. Okay. Now next point is these taxons have to do with something that is observable, something that is identifiable, right? So category will further denote rank. So now if the topic of taxon is clear, let me mention one thing that shouldn't be misunderstood. These categories, taxon, rank or level. Level is something that I have used. It's not mentioned in the textbook, but it's just something easy for you to understand. They are not just merely morphological aggregates, because we are stressing, right? Concrete, something that is visible, something that we are able to observe, observable characteristics. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're just morphological aggregates. Now this term morphological refers to the external anatomy of that organism. Okay, so if it is not just morphological aggregates, then what is it? It has something to do with an important term, biological entity. They are biological entities and not just morphological aggregates. Okay, so now if this point is clear, let us see one more thing, one important sentence that is mentioned in the textbook. The basis for all of this, the hierarchy, the categories, the taxon and rank, is that we have the observable knowledge about those organisms, about those creatures, and say species. Now if we take it as an example about them, that's how we are able to classify them, and that is very important for classification, right? So now if this is about classification, and I was talking about hierarchy, and I was writing K and S here and drawing a long line, right? There were things between them. So let us get to know more about all of these levels, these taxons, about these categories, about these levels, something that is called as a taxonomic hierarchy and the taxonomic categories involved in it. And let's get to know each of them, and let's get to know some basic examples, and in the end, we'll also name some animals, not name it because naming is binomial, isn't it? We'll also get to know we'll take an example of one animal, and then we'll write it belongs to this kingdom, this class, this species, and all that, okay? So now I've made this small table so that we can discuss and compare at the end also. Let us start with the first one, species. Species has, in this group, this category, we talk about animals that have fundamental similarities within themselves. Okay, fundamental similarities within themselves. So how do you differentiate two species? Based on the distinct morphological characters. So this is the most basic level of character classification, and also the last one, the last level. Okay. Now once these 2 points are cleared for you, I'm going to use examples to make it more approachable. Species are never written individual, because I told in binomial nomenclature we use genus and species, right? Together we write that. So now I'm going to write some names here. The one that I already used was Mangifera indica. I'll just erase this line of differentiation here because I want to use some examples that can be used to explain even this in its own small way. Now the examples are mango, potato and lion. Okay, Mangifera indica. And then we have Solanum tuberosum. And then we have Panthera leo. So now why I am using these examples is because, firstly because I don't mean specifically these examples. I mean why I am using examples is because first we notice that genus and species are written together, right? It's not like species are written separately. They're written with it. With the species, with the genus. Now, one small thing which is very important is one species belongs to a specific genus. Okay? Species belongs to a specific genus. Species to a specific genus. But a genus can have multiple species. A genus can have multiple species. Now we'll take an example to understand. Solanum can also have nigrum. Solanum nigrum. Solanum tuberosum. Now Panthera. Panthera can also have more. Tigris. Tiger, that is. So there are many different species under the same genus, no? So this is something that we are supposed to understand. Genus first, then species. Species belongs to a specific genus, but a genus can have many species. So this is something to do with species. Now let us talk about genus. Genus has to do with the aggregates of closely related species. Okay, closely related species. So we can very much understand that here itself. No, because if some species come together, they come under genus. Right? Because you might have noticed in general, when we represent all of them, we represent it as a triangle.